The history books tell you about the madness of Roman emperors. They mention Nero, they talk of Commodus. But there is one name they whisper, one story so depraved, so utterly vile, that it challenges the very notion of sanity. We're not talking about simple tyranny. We are talking about a man who dissolved the line between reality and nightmare. An emperor who appointed his horse to political office, who declared himself a living god, and who hosted a dinner party so horrifying, it has been deliberately erased from popular history. Forget what you know about Rome. You are about to enter the court of Caligula, a world where the most powerful man on earth was also the most dangerously insane. A place where the ultimate horror wasn't being sent to the Colosseum, but being invited to dinner. This is the story of the emperor who held a dinner party for corpses. To understand the dinner party, you first have to understand the host. Caligula wasn't just cruel. He was a performance artist of terror. He would sit in the theater and, out of sheer boredom, order his guards to throw an entire section of the crowd into the arena to be devoured by wild animals during intermission. He had an obsession with humiliation. He forced the wives of his senators to work as prostitutes in the palace brothel, forcing their husbands to watch. He would interrupt state meetings by breaking into fits of hysterical laughter. When his advisors asked what was so funny, he'd calmly reply, "I was just thinking that with a single nod of my head, I could have all of your throats cut." But wait. It gets so much worse. He didn't just think he was a god. He believed he could control them. He would stand in his palace during thunderstorms, screaming challenges at Jupiter, the king of the gods, daring him to strike him down. He built a 2-mile-long floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae for no other reason than to ride his horse across it, declaring he had conquered the sea god Neptune himself. This wasn't politics. This was a man at war with reality. Caligula's palace wasn't a home. It was a laboratory for sadism. He kept a collection of monstrous torture devices he called his darlings, and would demonstrate them on prisoners during lavish meals, forcing his guests to applaud the victims' screams. Here's a detail they are terrified to teach you in school. He had a favorite method of execution called death by 1,000 cuts. He would instruct the executioner to inflict small, non-lethal wounds over hours, sometimes days, with the explicit command, "Make him feel that he is dying." He wanted to savor their agony. He blurred the lines between man and beast in the most sickening ways. His beloved horse, Incitatus, wasn't just a pet. It had a marble stall, an ivory manger, a jewel-encrusted collar, and a staff of slaves. Caligula officially nominated the horse for the position of consul, the highest office in Rome. This wasn't a joke. It was a declaration that his senators, the most powerful men in the empire, were less valuable to him than an animal. And that brings us to the night of the dinner party. An event so infamous, the few historical accounts that survive speak of it in hushed, terrified tones. The invitations went out to the wealthiest senators, the ones Caligula despised the most. When they arrived, the grand dining hall was draped entirely in black.
The walls, the floors, the ceilings.
The servants were dressed as ghouls from the underworld, moving in complete silence. Beside each terrified guest seat was not a place card, but a miniature tombstone, carved with their own name. They were forced to sit there, in the pitch black, as the emperor described in graphic, loving detail the exact methods he planned to use for their executions. But that wasn't the main event. This is the part history tries to forget. As the senators sat paralyzed by fear, Caligula gave a signal. The silent, ghoulish servants didn't bring out platters of food. They brought out the recently executed bodies of the senators' own relatives. Men who had been arrested on false charges just days earlier. He had the corpses propped up in chairs at the table, dressed in fine robes, as if they were honored guests. He then raised a glass and began toasting them, speaking to them, laughing with them, forcing the living senators to participate in this grotesque charade. They had to sit there, for hours, dining next to the cold, dead bodies of their loved ones, pretending everything was normal, because the slightest sign of distress would mean they were the next to join the silent guests. This wasn't a meal. It was a psychological vivisection.
An act of cruelty so absolute and so creative, it stands alone in the annals of human evil.
An emperor cannot conduct a dinner party for the dead and expect to live. His reign of terror lasted less than 4 years. He wasn't overthrown by a foreign army or a popular revolt. He was killed by the very men forced to protect him, his own Praetorian Guard. They didn't just assassinate him. They butchered him. He was stabbed over 30 times, his body hacked to pieces in a final, desperate act to erase the nightmare he had become. They even murdered his wife and smashed his infant daughter's head against a wall, to ensure no heir of his bloodline could ever take power again. Caligula's story isn't just about a mad emperor. It's a terrifying warning about what happens when one man is given unchecked power over reality itself. He became a god in his own mind, and in doing so, he created a hell on earth for everyone else. His name was so hated that the Senate tried to have all records of his existence destroyed, to literally wipe him from memory. But some stories are too monstrous to be erased. They linger in the shadows of history, waiting to be told. If you believe that the darkest truths are the ones we need to hear the most, subscribe now. The rabbit hole of history is far deeper and far more terrifying than you can possibly imagine.